Oh, those rascally wrestlers, always getting into trouble and playing jokes on each other. Most of the time, these jokes are harmless and only take a little bit of planning. Other times, they take tons of work, are flat out cruel, and possibly illegal. These pranks went way too far. Before we go further, click the subscribe button and join the notification squad to never miss a video. Bucket of slop. It's a trope of wrestling that is right up there with the foreign heel and the all-American hero. A disgusting blue-collar worker going up against an obnoxiously good-looking jerk. Well, this specific feud between the good old country boys, the Goodwins, and the Body Donnas got a little bit messier than others. You see, Sunny was not very well liked backstage by the boys, when she wasn't sleeping with them, we guess. So some of them decided they needed to get back at her for being a meanie. Logically, the best course of action was to mix in some human waste into the slop bucket that was going to be dumped on her during a segment of Monday Night Raw. According to Henry Goodwin, when he told the boys backstage that Sunny was getting slopped that night and left the room, the bucket was only half full. When he came back, it was filled to the brim. She got a little bit of everyone that night, he said. If dumping God knows what on a person isn't a crime, we're not sure if we want to live in this world anymore. Rhyno and a cop. Here's a list of places where you don't want to mess with authority. The airport, the hospital, and most certainly on the side of the road when you're pulled over by cops. Unless, Russo swerve, the cops aren't really cops at all. After a long night of drinking, Rhyno and James Storm were driving through Tennessee when a cop pulled them over. Rhyno obviously stopped the car and acted like you're supposed to with a cop. Storm, however, was not, as he was throwing fries at Rhyno, saying he was on steroids and that he had a gun. Basically a checklist of what not to do with a cop. Of course, the cop pulls out a taser and tells Rhyno to get out of the car. Just as if this wasn't insane enough, Storm also gets out of the car and knocks out the cop. Storm tells Rhyno that they can run away and destroy the video evidence. Rhyno says nuts to that and runs full blast into the woods, presumably goring some trees along the way. It was only once Storm caught up to the rabid animal that he told him it was his brother. At least this was done to Rhyno, a pretty reasonable guy. Imagine if this was tried on Sid Vicious. Boy toy versus world's strongest man. Mark Henry is known as the world's strongest man, not the world's most mobile man. And this is when he isn't injured. You can only imagine how hard it is when he needs crutches to get around. Oh, also, don't piss off a guy who can rip off your limbs and eat your corpse. So Shawn Michaels in the 90s was about as fun to be around as an AIDS-infected mosquito. He was constantly acting like a douche to people around him, and also crying like a baby when people actually stood up to him. Well, like the fool he is, HBK actually thought it would be funny to piss off Mark Henry. A Mark Henry who was new to the business and didn't know the pranking nature of the locker room. When Henry suffered a broken ankle in 1996, wrestlers would hide his crutches to mess with him. HBK rubbed it in his face while standing behind Sycho Sid, but Henry wasn't concerned. He told Michaels that Sid wouldn't be able to stop him and he would rip his body from his skeleton and put his foot up his ass. Michaels then cried to his lover, we mean boss, Vince McMahon, presumably to get Henry fired. He was instead sent to Stampede Wrestling in Canada for his troubles. If Henry did get Michaels, it would make his last man standing match at Royal Rumble 2004 look like breakfast at Tiffany's. Watch your stuff. Owen Hart is known as the best ribber in the wrestling business, but also one who never did any truly malicious ones. This one isn't either, but it went too far in the sense of the amount of work not equaling the payoff. The victim of this prank would be Gangrel, former resident vampire, we guess, of the WWE. After exiting the locker room to go out to a wrestling match, probably near the bottom of a vampire's to-do list, Hart stole Gangrel's watch. You think this is the end of it? Oh, you don't know Owen Hart at all then. After finding his watch missing from his bag, Hart helped Gangrel look for it for about an hour. The next time they're in the same building months later, Hart puts the watch back in Gangrel's bag while Gangrel is in catering. Gangrel returns from his meal of blood and rats, only to find that the watch has magically appeared out of thin air into his bag. It was only after all this time that Hart revealed to him his sinister plot. We wish we could see some of this long-term booking from WWE more often. Those damn Harts. Okay, maybe we lied when we said Owen Hart pranks were never malicious. As we've already seen on this list, messing with the police seems to be a fun thing for wrestlers to do. While the incident with Rhyno was with a fake cop, this one was the real deal. To start our little tale, we have Davey Boy Smith, Owen Hart, and Lex Luger. Guess who's the victim here? Smith has a water pistol and begins to shoot some plainclothes police officers. When they ask who's doing it, Smith says it's Luger. They now want to talk to him, so Smith tells them to follow him to his hotel. Luger was known for going through red lights and speeding, so once they meet him, you know things are heated. But not enough for the Canadian and the Brit, who decide to make things worse by calling out the police officer and planting said water pistol in Luger's pants for the officer to pat down. For the final cherry atop this prank Sunday, this all happened near fans and WWE owner Vince McMahon. British Bulldog and Owen Hart, evil geniuses. Pop quiz, Vince McMahon may be the boss, but that doesn't make him immune from some pranks, especially in the early days of the WWF. Which tag team actually gave McMahon their finisher in a bar? Stay tuned for the answer. 6. Honey Piper. On WWE television, Roddy Piper was definitely one of the company's greatest rule breakers and tricksters. When did Piper realize that you had to play dirty in the pro wrestling business? Probably when he had honey on his ass. Way back in the pre-WWE landscape of wrestling, some promotions had a wrestling bear on their shows. Yes, this was actually a thing, so we can state at some point in time, Roddy Piper fought a bear. Surprisingly, that isn't the prank. The prank came in when Piper's friend Jay York came from behind and smacked Piper on the ass for good luck. Little did Hot Rod know that York's hand was smeared in honey, perfect for attracting a hungry bear. Did we mention that Piper caught the bear drinking bourbon before the show too? Maybe Piper should have had WWE's resident bear expert, Daniel Bryan, in his corner. We think the most shocking thing about all this, honestly, is how come Vince McMahon hasn't used a wrestling bear yet? It seems like something right up his alley. Maybe he doesn't want another Kennel from Hell match disaster. 7. Fireworks out of nowhere. Randy Orton's character has changed a lot throughout the years. Starting off as flavorless babyface before metamorphosing into his legend killer persona. What has been consistent throughout his real-life personality, Orton is kind of an idiot. If numerous wellness violations, dumping a bunch of tanning oil into a diva's bag, and destroying hotel rooms wasn't enough, then maybe this story will clinch it. In her You Shoot interview, current WWE performer Maria Kanellis told of a story that should terrify any sane person. One night, Randy Orton was in a car that was driving near Maria, Umaga, and Carlito. Now, a safe prank to pull would be to perhaps moon them with your bare ass. An insanely dangerous prank would be to rocket off fireworks at the car next to you. We'll leave you to guess which one Orton chose to do. Maria described it as one of the most terrifying experiences of her life. You gotta wonder that if Orton wasn't one of the WWE's golden boys, if Umaga would have confronted him backstage and slaughtered him. We guess Carlito would have spat an apple in his face or something. X-Pac's presence. We don't know how anybody who survived the WWE locker room of the Attitude Era didn't wind up killing one another throughout the year. We get that they were unified against the wrestling company WCW, but there's some crap that went too far. Speaking of crap, so X-Pac is a guy who by all accounts seems like a pretty cool dude, especially after getting his life back together from drug addiction. He certainly has come a long way from pulling the stuff he did in the Attitude Era to Sunny and Sable. For those who didn't know, both ladies were not exactly the most well-liked people in the back. Despite that, we think taking dumps in their dinners or bags is way over the line, because that's exactly what X-Pac did to the two ex-divas. The worst part of all is that according to Paul Bearer, Sunny actually consumed Chinese food that had been spiked with Pac's secret ingredient. That's something that would seem even too outlandish for sitcom families, but this happened in a wrestling locker room. We suppose when X-Pac ripped his anus in the ring years later, this was karmic justice. Asthma is deadly. Back in the 1960s locker rooms, the boys didn't have such things like video games, portable music, and other frivolities to amuse themselves. No, back in those days they had to make their own fun, like some good old-fashioned manslaughter. This tale comes to us from Ric Flair, a man who has admitted that he was never big into ribbing and pranks. He felt that it was basically bullying, but that doesn't mean he hasn't seen some in his day. In this story, wrestler Jay York noticed that something was weird with his asthma inhaler. It turned out that somebody had put lighter fluid in his inhaler. Great fun, right? Somebody almost dying is funny. Buddy Rogers and Johnny Valentine were the perpetrators of this rib, and they thought it was going to slide. Well, if they thought that, they don't know Jay York. He came back in the locker room with a shotgun and proceeded to unload on their bags. Well, it's a good thing Flair didn't copy everything about Buddy Rogers, or else Flair's robes would have been shot by an angry Sting or something. That poor dog. So we just saw someone almost killing a living being in the previous slide, so how could things get any worse? Well, leave it up to the legitimately evil and sinister Mr. Fuji to commit what we're pretty sure is a crime. As Roddy Piper tells the story, this happened back in the territory days, where a promotion generally kept the number of Asian wrestlers on the roster to 1. So when Harold Sakata, yes, that is the same actor who played Oddjob in Goldfinger, came into Fuji's territory and tried to politic for a spot, Fuji wanted revenge. Slash his tires? Nah. Stealing a man's car engine so it wouldn't start? Good, but Fuji would do that years later. Instead, Fuji invited the man and his family over for some food. As the family was eating, Fuji refrained, saying he wasn't hungry. Oh, once the meal was finished, Fuji went to get a surprise for them, the head of their dog. Yep, Fuji had just cooked their dog and served it to them mixed into the spaghetti they ate. We're not supposed to speak ill of the dead, but man, Mr. Fuji was an evil, evil man. So which tag team was it that had the balls or the stupidity to give their boss a heart attack? Why, the Hart family, of course, as Jim Neidhart and Bret Hart gave a drunken McMahon their finish once at a bar. Vince's response? You owe me a drink, Hitman. That's it for our list. Are there any insane pranks we left out? Which prank do you think was the most awful? If you say anything but the Fuji one, we wonder what's wrong with you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Sportster for more great videos. Thanks for watching.